And we're back. Hello, monster fans and horror lovers and mask collectors. Welcome once again to Creepy Cheapies with that guy, you know, him. Who's that guy? Me. Oh, okay, yeah, him. Monster lovers, it's a curious thing that most of the biggest names in the world of monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, and by the way, when I say Frankenstein, I mean the monster, not the doctor. Because the doctor's name technically is Frankenstein, but I call the monster. But okay, the big four of monsters are, of course, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy. It's interesting to note that all those monsters came along during the same period of movie history, which is way back in the 1930s and 40s, what humans call the Golden Age. And really, those are the big four. Those are the old men's club of monsters, if you will, and you can't argue that. That's the fact. Jack-o'-lantern. There have been more movies and more people, more name recognition, more movies and toys and storylines derived from more books and novels and short stories and stage productions and sequels and prequels and knockoffs and of those four monsters than any other monsters that have come along before or since. And when you think about it, even the other, like second tier, I was going to say second echelon, but I'm not sure how you pronounce that, so I'm not going to say it. Second tier, and I knew we'd come to tears. Second tier monsters who are almost as big, like the Bride of Frankenstein, the Invisible Man, the Phantom of the Opera, Mr. Hyde. Those guys also came along in that same period of movie history, way back when, and there haven't been that many challengers in more recent times. To this day, Frankenstein, the monster, Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman, those are kind of the biggest monsters. But once in a while, another monster comes along who is allowed into the club just by virtue of being so influential with audiences and so popular at the box office. And, well, one of the perks of being an extremely famous horror character is that you get immortalized the greatest number of times in things like masks. Hey, that's what we're here for, right? Masks, but also action figures and toys and candles and paintings and wallet covers and t-shirts and bumper stickers and jigsaw puzzles and vats of road paving compound and dental implants and artificial heart valves and bottles of bleach and all those collectibles that they make. Well, the same monsters, once again, are the most popular. At every Halloween, you're going to see Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy, along with some other monsters that are more current. But those are always popular and recognizable by everybody. I guess you'd call that universally recognized because most of those movies came from Universal Studios. Okay, there's a pun there somewhere, but I'm not going to take the time to unscramble it. You guys, I gave you the parts. Now you guys make a joke out of that. Anyway, those monsters are the most successful and the most often imitated and the most widely merchandised. Now remember, it stands to reason that if, say you have 100 people sculpt a likeness of the same character, like for instance, Frankenstein, and I'm talking about the monster, not the doctor. Although the same is true in the case of the doctor as well, but I'm talking about the monster. And by the way, I know Frankenstein, and I asked him if it was okay if people call him Frankenstein. And he's like, so okay. Because I told him, some people say that's only the doctor's name, and you're not really Frankenstein. And the Frankenstein monster thought about it for a second, and he said, what those people say my name. And I said, well, those people say you don't have any name at all other than just the monster. And he went, ah! And I said, okay, Frankenstein it is, that's fine. Please put my car back down. You know, Frankenstein's not such a bad guy. We all have certain things that aggravate us, and he has his. But anyway, if you have 100 people sculpt the likeness of the Frankenstein monster, obviously some of them are going to be really impressive works of art that everyone's going to love. Others are going to be not as good. You know, they can't all score a 10. This is not a universe where everybody gets a participation award or anything. No, the reality is some masks and props and paintings and drawings and likenesses are excellent and are first rate and are very impressive. Others, not so much. Okay, now having said all that, I would like to bring up a mask today. You thought I'd never get around to it, but those of you who are still awake are going to be rewarded because you're going to get to see this lovely mask. Now, again, this is a character who came along later, after the 1930s and 40s, but still made it into the annals of world's most famous horror characters. And that's right, I'm talking about, of course, you know him, you love him, Michael Myers. Yeah. Now, this particular Michael Myers mask is from Trick or Treat Studios, who did a lot of Michael Myers masks. This one came out back in the 2020 season and was supposed to be featured on Creepy Cheapies in 2021, but a lot of very bad things happened, and it took down the whole world. And the Creepy Cheapies episode that was supposed to happen with this mask, it didn't happen. What was I talking about? Anyway, as you can see, this Michael Myers mask from Trick or Treat Studio, I would say is one of their lesser efforts. Not as impressive as some. For one thing, I've seen all of the Halloween movies, which of course are the movies that contain the character of Michael Myers. All the movies in the Halloween franchise actually have him wearing a mask that's predominantly white. Okay, now it varies a little from movie to movie because there are a lot of sequels. So it could be said that it's not necessarily white, like white as snow, but always, you know, somewhere like, eggshell or parchment to a winter sky sort of color, but always a variation on white. Never this bright green that you see here. No, never that green. And another problem is that he has these big blue eyes with these gold centers on here. In the movies, Michael Myers just has holes cut out, see, and just like a traditional Halloween mask, just has the eyes cut out. And you don't see any of that stuff. Now, another problem would be the absence of hair. Now, I know some masks are not as deluxe as others, and some masks that should have hair only have molded in and painted on hair rather than actual hair. But it kind of spoils the Michael Myers likeness when you consider that in all the Michael Myers movies, he has brown hair, and he has kind of a full head of hair with a hairline going something like this, something like that, right around the middle there. And again, the color varies, sometimes a little lighter or darker. The hair might be a little longer or shorter from movie to movie. But his mask always has that brown hair on it. And then, of course, there are the additional liabilities of the big red lips. And despite what you might have seen in an old Elusive Concepts catalog many years ago, Michael Myers doesn't have red lips in any of those movies. Most of them, the lips aren't painted at all. They're just the same color as the rest of his off-white sort of face. So the red lips would be, another mistake with this mask. And then, of course, finally, you have to take into account the fact that they added all these scales and gills and fins and things all over the place. And it really distracts you from thinking of Michael Myers, and it's not really conducive to the Michael Myers look. And when you take all those factors into account, I would just have to say this is absolutely the third worst Michael Myers mask I think I've ever seen. But you know what they say, when life gives you lemons, say, where in the world did these lemons come from? And call the police and ask them who got into your house and left lemons in there, and track that down, because you don't want strangers coming into your home and leaving lemons in your fridge. But in the meantime, the nice thing about this mask that came out from Trick or Treat Studios in the 2020/21 season is that it looks just like another great character, the creature from the Black Lagoon. The creature from the Black Lagoon, whose first movie appearance was in 1954. We've talked about him in other mask videos, and I've already told you. If you don't know, though, in the original movie, they actually used two different masks, okay? One for the underwater photography scenes, which was worn by a stunt swimmer, and a slightly different mask that was larger worn by the actor who played the creature above the water on land. And it's so well edited in the movie that nobody notices, but it is two slightly different masks. So in the collector circles, there are the land creature and the underwater creature, and that's what people call them depending on which mask and from which scene in the movie, which part of the movie they're talking about. This happens to be based on the land creature, which was the mask worn when the creature was up on land, above the water, worn by a fellow named Ben Chapman in the original movie. Now, of course, everybody and his brother has sculpted a creature from the Black Lagoon likeness at some point. Have you ever met everybody's brother? That guy's kind of a jerk in person. He is. Don't tell him I said that, though, because he's got a temper. Anyway, everybody and his brother and his third cousin's uncle's best friend's neighbor has come out with some variation on the creature. And the original mask from the movie and the original design is such a spectacularly intelligent and logical and believably organic, realistic depiction of what a half-man, half-fish person might look like. It's almost impossible to design any other kind of aquatic or amphibious or underwater monster and not make it look a little bit like the creature and not have people say, oh, you ripped that off the creature from the Black Lagoon, because he's so perfectly designed. But anyway, this mask is the land creature, and when it first came out from Trick or Treat, it sold for about $65, which is not bad. Not bad at all. As you can see, it's got a very long back piece here, and they were clever enough to add these Velcro fasteners to the back. I don't know if you can see that, but that way you could put it on your head if you actually wanted to make like Ben Chapman and go stomping around scaring people as the creature, and then fasten the little Velcro tabs together, and it holds together. And the problem with cutting it down the fin, as some people have done in the past, is that you never get both edges of his dorsal fin to line up perfectly, whereas it's much easier to smooth that down. Although I didn't take the time to do a neat job just now, but trust me, it's easier to get that to line up beside the fin than it is right in the center of the fin. So I think they were smart to do that. And now, if you got one of these masks back when it was first released, you might have experienced some customer dissatisfaction because there were some problems with early copies. There was a finish used on the lips primarily that was a high gloss glaze to make the lips look really shiny and wet. That stuff cracked to pieces, and a lot of them, the original ones, the first run, were sent out brand new with the lips all smashed and cracked and broken, because people who would store them and ship them and put them out in stores and send them through mail order would squash them in the flattest little box possible. Or those white plastic mailing, those big mailers, you know, like a big plastic, looks like a garbage bag, but they use them for mailing masks. I hate those things because people smash the masks that go in them. So I always recommend using a cardboard box so you don't let that happen. But anyway, it is to Trick or Treat's credit that when people complained, I wonder who complained. I don't know who would do such a thing. But when people complained that, hey, the lips are all cracking on my creature from the Black Lagoon looking guy there, well, and you couldn't fix it because some of us tried. We tried picking it off, but it would take the paint off with it. So what happened was that stuff was changed, and the next series of the next run, I should say, of production copies of this particular mask had something else used on it that was slightly more flexible, slightly less shiny, way more sensible in terms of mailing and packing and so forth. Anyway, such an excellent likeness. As you can see, he's got just a little bit of dry brushed on metallic gold highlighting, and I think they do a nice job of that. I've seen some collectors go crazy with the gold and put way too much gold on there, and you end up seeing more gold than you do green. And you know, then it doesn't look like the creature's head so much as it does the 31st Annual Creature Award for Best Supporting Player or something like that. So the way they do it is nice and kind of subtle. He's not like super gold all over. He's just kind of got some dry brush highlights, and it looks nice, and it brings out some of the lines and contours of the sculpture. And you can see him from all the various sides here. And yeah, there are details that some creature masks have that this one doesn't, such as the underside of the gills being painted red. He doesn't have that, but you can do that if you like, and really it's not that important of a thing. It's not a deal breaker, I don't think, because who looks at him from the back and behind and looks up at the gills and, it should be darker and red, and but you know, yeah. It's still pretty great, especially if you can get one anywhere near the $65, $75 price point area. Now, it's possible that by the time you see this, you may not be able to get this mask, or you may end up paying $5,268 for it. I hope not. But why do I say that? Because it was announced in 2023 that this mask was being discontinued, okay, stopped, dropped, out of production, OOP, no more. Yet that is pronounced OOP, OOP, OOP. See, he's smarter than he looks. OOP means no more creatures. So if you're seeing this way after the end of the year 2023, maybe these will be hard to find, or maybe a contractual agreement will have been reached and the contract will have been renewed and they'll be in production again. But if you're seeing this around the end of 2023, anywhere in there, I would say buy one, pick one up, and add it to the collection. And I hope you don't have to pay $1 million for it. I hope you find somebody who's blowing them out cheap because it was discontinued. And that's not because there's anything wrong with the mask like that original Rip issue I was talking about. That's just because the contract is ending between Trick or Treat Studios, who produce the mask, and Universal Studios, who own the rights to Michael Myers, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, like you see here. So get one of those, I think, and there's your fun mask story for today. And for heaven's sake, get back to work. And just one more thing, you know, is it my imagination, or are the commercial interruptions longer now than they were when I was still living?